That's why I like sport at this university, because you can always just turn back to what you wanted to do or change your mind. There's always opportunities.
In the time I've been here, I've seen students go down an extraordinary number of routes, really. Such a rich and varied range of disciplines between performance, health, working with recreational athletes, elite athletes. We've seen students working in sports development roles. We've seen students working in high performance, semi-professional teams. We've seen students go into the NHS. With students working across an incredible range of disciplines: coaching, nutrition, sports science. What I think is brilliant about this area is it provides students with so many options and introduces them to so many different subjects. And I think as a result, then we get students who start the degree with specific sort of ideas about what they may or may not want to become, and then the degree program opens them up to such a range of opportunities. And hopefully by the end of the degree, then they've got a reasonably good idea of what it is they want to do. But I think they do get exposed to a huge range of opportunities, and they see that studying this subject opens up those opportunities.
I think the links that the different programs within the school have got from a placement perspective really gives that exposure, as you've just alluded to there, in that somebody could come with quite a set vision of where they want to be, and actually the exposure that they get from the program about that vision might then change their pathway for better, if they decide that's not quite for them, but this experience that they had is really valuable and is where they want to go from there.
I think what's interesting for me is often the hook is sport. People come in because they've had positive experience, maybe rewarding experiences through sport. But like Lois said, the breadth of the discipline, you start to see the application to other areas, including health and helping others. And that, you start to feel the reward that comes with that as well. You start to learn about how helping others through this discipline can bring a lot of reward as well. And that's what I think helps some students to see maybe the pathway isn't sport, it's another direction once they're in the degree program.
Yeah, well, then we get students who come in who might be absolutely determined to work in performance, for example, and they're determined to work in performance. That seems to be the specific route they have in mind. But then they realize because of the nature of the degree that there are a huge range of opportunities, additional opportunities. And I've seen that in a number of cases, students determined to go down a performance route who end up going down a health route, for example, or work in health and exercise settings. Yeah. And it's nice to see that journey. I think it's nice to see students realize the options that are available, and then on the basis of their experience, make a decision about going down a different route.
Yeah,
it's great. And
even through sport, you can find health. So sport for positive youth development, let's say, as sport development opportunities. So using sport to positively influence young people. It doesn't have to be exercise and health. Sport also matches up quite well with health in some career pathways. So there are more and more exercise professionals being employed in the NHS, working alongside physios. So physio is more about restoration of function, restoring function, but then what happens thereafter in terms of longer term exercise prescription. And that's where the exercise specialists are needed in the NHS, but also beyond the NHS, to signpost beyond their acute treatments. And there are more and more opportunities for sport and exercise science graduates in those settings.
The rehab program in particular has over time, these past sort of couple of years, has really developed the connections that we've got with private health companies who have been essentially commissioned by the NHS to run these types of exercise classes. So the prehab or indeed the rehab of group exercise. So we're finding patients have been grouped into post-knee replacement, post-hip replacement, that generic lower back pain, and they need sport health and exercise science graduates to deliver those programs safely and effectively for the patients. Yeah. So I think there's a huge demand for that.
Yeah, definitely. I can only sort of speak from that from sort of my perspective and what I've gone through with my current placements. So I'm in that sort of similar role. So we're working alongside the ERI, so the exercise rehabilitation instructors, and a lot of what they do is surrounding sort of not only the exercise side of stuff, but the education as to why, and that's a massive sort of area in which sort of goes a little bit sort of, it's not that important. It really is. Like, you don't see it until you get involved in that sort of population as to how much you can actually teach someone from a reasoning of why we do things and the way we do things, and even the basics of just walking and getting moving, and how much of a difference it makes to someone's life over a longer period of time is crazy.
I know when I came in, I always wanted to go in, learn physiology, biomechanics, everything like that, graduate, try and get into a professional rugby club and like work your way up through the ranks in that sense. And then it was only until sort of my last year when do my dissertation. I did my dissertation in respiratory muscle training in rows and cycling, and it was only until after that, and I was like, oh, research. I've maybe one of the weird ones. I actually enjoyed doing my dissertation. I was like, okay, I want to go into more study. I want to go into a master's, and I spoke to my supervisor at the time, and he was like, well, we'll try and find a master's for you. And sadly, it was in like the peak COVID time, so like we approached like the rugby league clubs around here, everything like that, and they were all quite closed off. And then he was like, oh, there's a clinical one up. I was like, well, I hadn't really looked that into clinical before, so I was like, okay, we'll do it. And then I've spent the last year doing sort of clinical research and how we've been looking at like fan therapy and like a symptom control, but the sport side of it comes in the exercise testing. So that's like my side of everything. And then we've been using the medical school as well from there, like COPD and that kind of perspective. But this last year has kind of opened up that whole clinical side of everything for me. So even where sort of I'm now applying to sort of like clinical based PhDs, sort of research jobs and all that kind of thing. Something that if I'd maybe told myself in first year, I wouldn't have said I'd go into research, especially clinical. So it was something that kind of took me by surprise, sort of only until like right at the end of my degree when I kind of realised like, oh, there's a whole new branch of clinical that you can go down the rabbit hole with. But yeah, it was one of those.
I feel quite passionately about sort of women in sport. Like I had a recent trip to India and I got to experience a whole number of different things, working closely with the University of Delhi and Sri Ramachandra, which was really eye-opening. And that was actually set up as a study tour through Hull Uni. And sort of being able to speak to the students at those universities really made me realise I'm actually very lucky in just sort of having the opportunities that I've had, sort of thing. And talking to them about their participation in sport was very, very different to the way I was brought up and the opportunities that I got here. So I think I'd like to go into sort of, I don't really know how to put it, but sort of women in sport in sort of less economically developed countries, and sort of spreading the message kind of thing that actually, no, you can do this, you can sort of achieve anything you want to, and sort of sporting study tour type things. It's quite an ambitious idea, but I think sort of just spreading the word of actually.
Would that be like sport development in women's sport?
I think so.
Outside?
Yes, and just sort of kind of because so many of the girls that I met whilst I was out there just did not do it.
There's just no like platform
Yeah,
for them to actually join
and
onto.
like there just weren't the opportunities within the separate unis, and obviously the University of Delhi, it's like one of the biggest and the best in India. But even there, the facilities that they had, you know, not like they're good, but they don't have that same opportunity that we do here. Like I could quite easily wake up tomorrow and be like, I want to start playing cricket. and then I could go and join a cricket club like that, no issues. Whereas I think there's so many girls in the world that just do not have that as an option. So I think going into something like that, I think would be really, really good. Yeah.
My ideal plan is to have just about completed a PhD. Over the last year, I've sort of been applying left, right, and centre, trying to get the right project. And me and my supervisor for my masters at the moment, we're trying to like create a project in mind. So hopefully, sort of like 5-year period might just be towards the end of a PhD. Post 5 years, I'm looking at potentially either going into academia and like lecturing if I like that side of teaching. I need to get a little bit more exposure to it first. Bar that, sort of going into more of like senior research jobs and just going that like route of discovery, probably in a clinical setting, but also having the same sort of skills and experience to also go into a sports setting as well, because research is research. Whether it's clinical or sports, some of the same like study design and methods and skills are all transferable. So I find that research side for me is sort of like the best medium between I can go clinical or I can go sport, and it will be very transferable throughout my career.
Well, in the last 3 years at university, I've changed my mind on what I want to do so many times. I think I wanted to be a personal trainer, a PE teacher, a researcher, specifically in kind of nutrition and football, working for like a nutrition company. And now obviously I'm working post-graduating for the university. I couldn't tell you what I'm going to do in the next 5 years, but I think that's half the enjoyment is kind of seeing where you end up. And going to university, you're almost given the keys to all these doors that you can open, and none of the doors are the wrong door. I mean, I'd happily do any of the careers that I've kind of thought about, and I'm sure I'd really enjoy all of them. But it's hard, obviously, to take the plunge into choosing one that I want to do, for the foreseeable future, and actually saying that's the career I want to go down. But I'm sure as I grow, as I kind of get more experiences, as I'm doing different things, it will all fall into place. And I'll about to say, yep, I want to go and do kind of a research master's, or I want to go and do my PGC and become a teacher. So yeah, I'd say I'm not sure what I want to do in the next 5 years, but hopefully it will be within kind of the sport field, because working for the university, I have really missed kind of being involved in learning and in sport and stuff like that. So I think if anything, it has opened my mind to the fact that I really do miss being in a sporting environment and learning about kind of sport and nutrition.
I'm in 3rd year now for sport and exercise nutrition, and still just as passionate about nutrition. I did start off thinking I was going to go into like sport and like elite athletes and their nutrition, but as the course has gone on, I've got more into like the health side of things, and we've had talks from lecturers on the dietetics master's course and dietitians have like come in and shown us like what they do and all the different people that they work with. I found that so interesting. It's definitely turned my head, and I'm thinking about, well, I'm definitely going to do a dietetics master's, I think, and then hopefully become a dietitian after. But even just in that career path, there's so many different like branches. Like you can work with all different people on the nutrition, and even if I do decide I still want sport, you can go into that afterwards anyway. And that's why I like sport at this university, because you can always just turn back to what you wanted to do or change your mind. There's always opportunities.